When family falls apart, the truth my stepdaughter couldn't see. The house felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. The air was too still, too quiet. It was a Sunday morning, and I should have been used to the soft hum of the world waking up around me. But today? Today, there was an emptiness I couldn't shake. My eyes flicked over to the wall where the family photos hung, memories frozen in time. They were all there except for one thing. Me. Every picture that should have had my face was now missing it. A blank space, a silent accusation staring back at me. My chest tightened, my hand tightening around the coffee cup I hadn't realized I was still holding. It hit me like a punch. This wasn't just a strange coincidence. This was deliberate. The sound of footsteps on the stairs pulled me out of my trance. Hannah. She came down slowly, phone in hand, her gaze glued to the screen as though it held more interest than the world around her. Not a glance, not a word in my direction. She didn't need to make it obvious, but she did anyway. Her deliberate avoidance was as clear as day. I tried to keep my tone neutral. Morning. A simple greeting. But the weight of the silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't how it used to be. For 3 years, I'd been trying. I thought, with time, I could fill the gap, be something more to her than just a guy her mom married. I thought we had built something, movie nights, helping with homework, those small moments that add up to something bigger. I thought she was beginning to trust me. But somewhere along the way, things changed. I remember the last fight we had, over a chemistry project. She'd been struggling, and I had offered to help, hoping it would mean something. Her words cut deeper than I expected. Stop pretending you care about my grades. You're not my real dad. The sting of those words lingered longer than I wanted it to. And the silence that followed, the silence from Claire, my wife, spoke volumes. She said nothing. Did nothing. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but instead, I stayed quiet. I knew then. Things were different now. This wasn't just a teenage phase. Hannah had already made up her mind. And somewhere along the way, I had lost my place in her life. It was the most painful realization I had ever had. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me as I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, staring at the old duffel bag in my hands. It was time. There was no use in pretending anymore. Claire's passive silence was suffocating, the kind of silence that screamed louder than any argument ever could. She sat at the kitchen table, her gaze distant, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the edge of her coffee cup. She didn't even look at me when I grabbed my things. You're not my real dad. I'd heard those words 1,000 times. They had cut me before, but this time? This time they felt different. This time, they felt final. And then she said it. The words that shattered what was left of my resolve. Maybe we'd all be better off without you. There was no fight left in me. No response to give. I simply zipped the bag closed and lifted it off the bed, the weight of it feeling heavier than the clothes it contained. My steps were slow as I walked past her, my eyes never meeting hers. What was left to say? I'm sorry, I wanted to tell her. But the words wouldn't come. She didn't stop me. Didn't even flinch as I made my way toward the door. My hand hovered on the doorknob for a moment, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Not after everything. Not after she chose her silence over any words of comfort or understanding. As I stepped out the door and into the cool morning air, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind me. Hannah. She didn't speak, didn't look back. She simply disappeared upstairs, her retreating footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Another reminder that I wasn't wanted here anymore. It was a quiet departure, almost too quiet. But that's how it always is, isn't it? The moments we think will be filled with rage or confrontation are often drowned out by the sound of silence. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about my family, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. I stayed at Ben's place for a few days, trying to numb the ache that refused to go away. His guest room was small, the walls lined with bookshelves and memories of his own life, nothing that felt like mine. I didn't expect answers here, but maybe some peace. But the silence in my head was only growing louder, drowning out any hope of sleep. And then came the text. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, dragging me out of my restless thoughts. I stared at it for a moment before picking it up. Claire. Her name on the screen almost made me sick. I opened the message, not sure what I was expecting. What could she possibly want to say to me now? Her words hit me like a slap across the face. Please call me, there's something you need to know about Hannah. I didn't bother responding. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled through my notifications, hoping to distract myself from the heavy feeling building in my chest. And that's when I saw it. A Facebook post. Miles. The photo was from a local restaurant, taken just a few days ago. There he was, smiling, as if nothing had changed. As if he hadn't disappeared from Hannah's life for years. The man who had failed her, abandoned her, and was now back with open arms. Why now? I scrolled through his profile, my fingers moving faster than I could think. The comments were filled with old friends, catching up and celebrating his return. He had the same broad smile that once fooled everyone around him. I felt bile rise in my throat. It didn't make sense. Why had he waited until now to come back into her life? What had changed? I felt my blood begin to boil, a fire building deep within me. I knew something wasn't right. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. And then, it hit me. The pieces started to fall into place. The sudden shift in Hannah's behavior, the way she'd grown distant, the way she had pushed me away. It wasn't just typical teenage rebellion. It wasn't just me. Miles was back. And that was the real reason things had been falling apart. I took a deep breath and scrolled through Claire's messages. They had gone from angry accusations to desperate pleas. Why won't you answer me? Please, just hear me out, one read. Another, I never wanted it to come to this, but Miles, he's back. And he's not what you think. The words hit me with the force of a freight train. Not what I think. I should have known. It made perfect sense. Miles wasn't just back to make amends, to be the father he had promised to be. No, he was back to ruin everything. He was here to manipulate her once again. I began searching. Digging. I couldn't sit back and wait anymore. Within minutes, I found the documents. Legal papers. Articles. Scams. Miles had built an empire out of lies, using his charm and his business ventures to exploit people like Hannah, people like Claire. He had run the same kind of scam over and over, stringing people along with promises of quick wealth, only to disappear when they were broke and empty-handed. He wasn't just a liar. He was a predator. As I read through the details of his fraudulent businesses, my anger grew. He had been playing everyone, including me. The man who had disappeared for years, who had ignored his daughter's calls, had only been waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. And now, he had reappeared to play that family hero. But this wasn't a reunion. It was a trap. How could Claire let this happen? How could she allow him back into our lives? Into Hannah's life? The questions kept spinning in my head as I sat there, the weight of betrayal heavy on my chest. Claire's silence, her refusal to see the truth, was a slap in the face. She had known, or should have known, what Miles was capable of. Yet she allowed him to worm his way back into our world, all while I was left to clean up the mess he had left behind. The truth was clear now. Miles wasn't here to heal wounds, he was here to reopen them, to use Hannah just like he had used everyone else. And I was left to pick up the pieces. Again. I had to make the call. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, it had all led to this moment. But when I dialed Claire's number, I wasn't prepared for the cold, defensive tone that greeted me. "Ethan," she said, her voice tight, almost robotic. "I've been trying to reach you." "What's going on?" "Don't act like you don't know," I replied, my own frustration barely contained. "Miles is back. And I know exactly what he's doing." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, her hesitation. "I don't want to hear this, Ethan. You don't know him like I do. You don't understand." "Understand?" I interrupted, the anger rising in me. "I understand that he's using you. And he's using Hannah. And if you don't see that, then I don't know what's left for us." She went silent. I didn't need her approval anymore. I couldn't let history repeat itself. I couldn't let Miles poison Hannah's mind again. I had to do something, anything, to stop it. The next day, I knew it was time. Time to confront Hannah. I found her in the living room, her eyes focused on her phone as usual, the glow of the screen casting a faint light over her face. When I stepped in, she didn't look up, but I could feel her tension. Something was different. She was waiting for me to speak. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. That wouldn't help. Instead, I laid the papers on the table in front of her. Slowly, I unfolded them, each page filled with the truth about Miles, his scams, his lies, his past. I didn't rush her. I let her absorb the information, the full weight of it. Her eyes flicked from the documents to my face, her expression unreadable at first. Then, as she began to process the truth, her entire demeanor shifted. Her lips trembled, her hands gripped the papers, and I could see the shock in her eyes. It was like a dam had cracked open, and she was drowning in the reality of what I had just shown her. "Miles he's been lying to me," she whispered, almost as if she was trying to convince herself. I nodded, careful not to push too hard. "He's not the man he's made you believe he is, Hannah. He's been using you, just like he used everyone else." The words hung in the air between us. It was a painful truth, one I had hoped I wouldn't have to confront. But I knew she had to hear it, no matter how much it hurt her. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. "But he's my father. He's the one who promised me everything." I could see it in her eyes. The doubt. The struggle. Miles had built a fantasy for her, one she had held onto, desperate for the kind of love he had promised. It wasn't easy to let go of that dream. And it broke my heart to watch her try. The tension between us was unbearable. I could feel her pain, her internal battle. The man she had wanted so desperately to love her was nothing more than a predator, and now she had to face the truth. But the truth was a bitter pill to swallow. "I know it's hard to hear, Hannah," I said softly, my voice cracking just a little. "But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to protect you. You have to see what he's really been doing. And I'm not going to let him destroy you." Her head dropped, and for a moment, I thought she might break. But then, something shifted. A flicker of clarity in her eyes. "I thought he was the one who cared about me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But he's been lying to me this whole time." The words were a breakthrough, a moment of realization that I had been waiting for. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The truth had set the wheels in motion, but Hannah wasn't ready to let go of the fantasy of Miles just yet. As I watched her struggle, I realized this wasn't just about saving her from Miles. This was about saving her from herself, the version of herself that believed the lies. I turned to Claire, who had been silent the whole time. She had been avoiding this conversation, pretending the problem would go away on its own. But now, standing in the doorway, her face twisted with confusion and guilt, she had no choice but to confront it. "We need to act," I said, my voice firm. "For Hannah. We need to protect her, Claire. Not just from him, but from the dangerous path she's walking down." She didn't answer right away, but I saw the gears turning in her mind. She couldn't deny it anymore. Not with the evidence laid bare in front of her. We have to do this together, I added, looking her in the eye. This is our family. And it's not just about keeping Hannah safe from Miles. It's about giving her a chance at a future where she's not held hostage by his lies. Claire nodded slowly, the weight of our decision settling in. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. But I knew we had to take a stand. For Hannah. For the truth. This wasn't just a battle for the truth, it was a fight for her future. The days following the confrontation felt like a slow, painful rebuilding process. Claire and I had a long road ahead of us, but we were taking the first steps. For the first time in what felt like forever, we decided to attend counseling together. There were too many unspoken things between us, too much left unsaid that had been festering for years. Sitting in that room, we finally acknowledged the mistakes, the miscommunications, the silence that had built walls between us. It wasn't easy, but it was a start, a fragile, but necessary start. I could see the weight in Claire's eyes, the remorse and the regret. But there was something else too, a flicker of hope, of a desire to make things right. It wouldn't happen overnight. We both knew that. But for the first time, we were facing the truth together, without the veil of denial. And that, for now, was enough. But there was still work to be done. The biggest hurdle was still standing in front of us. Hannah. We sat down together in the living room one evening, the tension that had once filled every corner of the house now replaced by something quieter, something more fragile. The anger had subsided, but the damage was still there, lingering like a shadow. We had a lot to talk about. I started gently, not wanting to push her too hard. Hannah, I said softly, I know I've made mistakes. And I know I haven't always been the father you needed me to be. She looked at me, her eyes red from the tears she'd shed in private. There was a stillness in her that I couldn't quite read. But she was listening. That was enough for me to keep going. I want to make things right, I continued. I want to be here for you. For real. I want to build trust again, but that's going to take time. It's going to take both of us, working through the things that hurt. Hannah's gaze softened, and she nodded slowly. I don't know if I can ever forgive him, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I want to try. I want to move forward, not just from him, but from everything that came with him. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were still so many things we hadn't said, so many wounds that needed healing. But in that moment, I saw a flicker of the girl I once knew, the one who could smile and laugh and believe in the possibility of better days. That girl was still there. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. A week later, the decision was made. Together, we would press charges against Miles for his fraudulent activities. It wasn't just about holding him accountable for the pain he'd caused, it was about taking control, about refusing to let him dictate the terms of our lives any longer. We couldn't undo the damage, but we could make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. I had done what I needed to do. I had protected my family. And in that, there was a quiet victory. The story ends not with finality, but with hope. Claire and I, still rebuilding, but now moving forward with intention. There was still much to heal, but we were on the right path. We were doing the work, together. Hannah, too, began to focus on her future. It wasn't easy. She still had moments of doubt, still had days where the shadows of Miles crept in, but she was learning to live without the toxic influence of her biological father. She was carving her own path now, finding her own way, no longer defined by someone who had never deserved her trust. And as we sat around the table that night, the three of us sharing a simple dinner, nothing extraordinary, just ordinary family moments, I realized something. Family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who show up. The people who protect you, who support you when the world feels like it's falling apart. True family is the one you choose. And as much as I had fought to protect them, they had fought to protect me too. And together we were stronger. We had each other. And that was enough.